This is trying to have another conversation surrounding stuff Asian American hate, all this stuff that happened in Atlanta, and really using it as a cultural moment to process, because Asian Americans, we don't hear Asian Americans processing around race a lot, and there's a whole white black binary, and others, I'm sure, feel frustrated that way when you're not within those binaries. We want to help make space for others, and we want to discipline ourselves to find our voice. And that's how I'm seeing this. But I also, it's been encouraging to hear resonances from different people and what they're seeing. And so Mike and I both know each other from back in campus ministry back at college, when you were doing seminary and I was there a student at Princeton, and that was an Asian American, predominantly Asian American setting. And now we've moved on since then. But we're both still trying to process that Asian American identity. And as followers of Jesus, how do I hold those together? Not just, oh, it's a fact about me, move on. But no, this is actually a part of how God has woven my story. And this is important to understand well about ourselves, so we can find out how to sit together at the table of brotherhood, shalom, beloved community, right? With our black brothers and sisters, with our white brothers and sisters, with others, by knowing ourselves and knowing how we fit into the bigger picture. So I want to see how we can help each other with that. So I want to hear where you're at, Mike, with all of this and your background and the current events.
Yeah, thanks. This is a really fun conversation and fun to reconnect. Not good circumstances around this reconnection, but really important stuff. So briefly, I've been in campus ministry for 15 years, and am probably most interested at the intersection right now of psychology and theology. My wife works at the Allender Center, and we've been in dialogue for now quite some time around trauma. And one of the things I've realized as an Asian American, I think, is like we've so prized academics and the life of the mind that sometimes it's actually really hard to feel, to access feelings and what's happening in our bodies. And my training with the Allender Center, which has been really trauma informed, is really trying to take the body seriously, and trying to take our bodily existence, our faces and our stories, much more seriously than what we know, what we can accomplish through degrees. So I realized, really this past year or two, like academics and the life of the mind has been such a safe haven, I guess, maybe even a coping mechanism or defensive mechanism, to not feel and to not be able to grieve, not only what's happening in our country, but in my own story.
Yeah.
And I think that is, so I find myself now in a Black campus ministry with Impact Movement, where I think collectively, we're trying to bring obviously our own voices, but with respect to the Black experience, I think there's a lot more that's been done around bodies and embodiment and more writing. And so I think we're in this process together, upon hearing the incidents of really starting with some of the physical assaults and the death of older Asian men. Really started to notice like just a numbness like in my body, and I was like, okay, I've been doing enough of this training now, where I'm asking myself not only what am I thinking about these issues, but what am I feeling? And the feeling was nothingness. The feeling was like almost a paralysis. right? And I said, okay, I think I've just got to get curious. I think we've got to get curious about, what is going on. So I, sort of continued with conversations. I just stepped into a bit more of the news. I think thinking about kindness and what what our capacity is, to see graphic, violent images on a
Right.
consistent basis.
Mhm.
Part of me does wonder if the numbness is because violence has become so normalized now that
Right.
it's just like looking at the weather report. Um,
Right.
but I think as I started having more conversations with a learning cohort of mine, I realized, and some things were starting to be acknowledged and named, and we actually watched, some of the PBS Asian Americans together.
Yep. Yep.
Um, just tears, grief started to really well up,
Yeah.
and um, and then this incident hit in Atlanta. And I think there was just more access to more grief, more tears, and more anger. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I've realized so much of my life I have just um, shut off the emotion. Um, you know, I either told myself or been told explicitly or implicitly, don't feel. Um, keep it moving. Keep up with your grades. Keep up with your academics. And we can say those are all good things, but um, at some level, very dehumanizing.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we make space to actually feel, that's terrifying.
Right. And I'll add, if you haven't seen examples of that sort of expressing the lament and then just sort of like responding in that way, and it's normalized within our group of people, perhaps it's just this sense of we don't do that or something. And I'm with you on that totally. I think that that's consistently what I'm seeing. I mean, I saw that reaction. Maybe if it's if you'd say the fight, flight, freeze, whatever, it's definitely not the fight. It's maybe the flight, or just I'm just gonna put that to the side, or the freeze, kind of thing, somewhere in there. And yeah, it's I mean, the cultural conversations are not as far along within AAPI, right?
Yeah.
If you want to aggregate it like that, sort of conversations. And so we don't have as many categories to reach for, and, you mentioned the PBS Asian Americans documentary. I found that one really helpful too. I'm actually working my way through Minor Feelings now, that, Q recommended to me. And man, I just watched, I read like a couple pages. I was like, whoa, it's crazy how, like, when you see your experience mirrored back to you, it's like revelations, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but for me, it's the layers. I mean, I guess for me, I've always navigated from the beginning. I was actually shied away from trying to navigate the Asian American identity piece, because I was back in college when I first had a real Asian American community, because I grew up where I didn't have one, right? I think similar to you, right? I mean, I know you grew up in the Chinese church. Maybe that was a small Asian American community. It wasn't really your predominant space of navigating. And so, like, at Princeton, at the Christian Fellowship, Manna, there we had an Asian American community, and that was like the first point. And there was also the broader Asian American community but I didn't connect up to like the Asian American sort of things there, the group. And I still have to discern partly why, but I think part of it was I already had this kind of Asian American home base, the Christian Fellowship. And for me, my passion is Jesus, right? And communicating and finding ways to help people come to know Jesus, And of course, it's not in sort of it's not in tension with navigating your cultural identity. But I think maybe partly sometimes I watched that and it felt like mainly sort of more well, I mean, there's such a broad umbrella of when you can advocate for like your group, racial group. So it's like if it was things like we want to advocate for, back at Princeton, they wanted to advocate for like an Asian American studies within the school, right, program. And I remember, when they would bring that up, they'd be like, I think that's a great idea. And I would, like, whatever you need me to do, I can vote for it, whatever. But I wasn't the one like canvassing. I wasn't the one like, hey, this is really important. And then, talking about, I think at that point, 10 or so more years ago, like, yeah, we don't have enough representation in Hollywood besides like the Jackie Chans, And I was like, yeah, you're right. But it wasn't what I was passionate about, partly because I didn't feel, maybe it was mainly Asian American. We were there at Princeton University, elite school. I didn't feel oppressed, and from my background, yeah, I was experienced all the microaggressions from white people that honestly is just ignorance, and then we learned to kind of just like brush aside, whatever. It's too much to try to explain to you, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so maybe it isn't really until it's actually learning from my Black brothers and sisters as they experience deep oppression where you can't avoid it every day, experience the intense history of like all that I'm like, yeah, I need to understand this about our own people. Actually partly motivated first by I'm frustrated with our own people, Asian Americans, Asians, in not relating to Black and brown people in a way that I think is just, right, healthy, good. But at the same time, I have to understand our own people and our experiences for what's functioning in us, for why we don't. And I need to know the history so that it's not this doesn't become like, well, we suffer too, well, how much, oppression Olympics, but to like recognize our different histories and then imagine together, how can they start to converge? How can we build, and that's been a journey for me. And again, that's why I'm saying I'm in process. This isn't like me pretending to be an expert on these things, but being transparent about where I am on that. And even, in a conversation with Christine yesterday, it was like, can we acknowledge there's a unique part of it too when it comes to being immigrants, children of immigrants. I assume your parents were immigrants as well.
Yeah.
And you could share more with me about that too, but like knowing that it's layers because we have to help our parents process where they probably didn't process, and I'm actually want to encourage my parents to, in their generation, start processing within themselves so that they can actually teach us, the second generation, here's what we went through, here's what's functioning in us, here's why we relate to culture in this way, where we basically just assimilated, and most of them assimilated to white culture, right? As much as possible. And maybe they created a small little cultural haven for themselves as well. For my parents, it would be the Chinese church that they had, and that was where their Chineseness would come out. But pretty much the rest of their life, they just assimilated. And then how that affected us and how that shaped how they relate to the broader cultural conversation and perceive Black, Indigenous, like perceive those who are otherized by the dominant conversation, which is white, right? So wanting to help our parents, wanting to understand all of this and how that especially then connects to faith, right? And I'm sure this is the kind of stuff I know that you're processing.
Yeah. Well, I want to kind of come back to that question that you, or at least the reality that you raised of like, you're in this Asian American community in college. You're talking about Jesus, you wanted to share Jesus, but it seems like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like those connections actually aren't made between what Jesus has to do with Asian Americans.
Yes. Yeah.
And that, like, okay, mostly like I grew up like learning about a white Jesus, or at least Jesus in a predominantly white context, white leaders, white theologians. And so that question of what does Jesus have to do with, Asian Americans, actually personally for me, I grew up lots of Swedes and Norwegians. So basically was, Scandinavian, wanted to be white and ended up.
Did you actually want to be white? Like, what do you mean by that? Wanted to be.
I lamented the fact that when people looked at me, mocked me for why do you have a flat face?
Wow.
Why did your dad have an accent? Sports teams, Chen on the back of my jersey was a source of shame
Wow.
because I could be I'm an easy target. Over and over and over again through, and and what you're told in that moment, maybe at home and by your parents, is just like, don't worry about them, keep on, trucking on. It's like, there isn't that space for like either grief or anger or sadness. But so I rejected Chinese culture. My parents tried to get me to go to Chinese school, Saturday Chinese school. I said, hell no, this is not what I'm doing. But when I came to faith at the end of high school, I actually started to ask the question, and I don't know what necessarily inspired this. I was actually asking questions about identity in general. But as I received, the love of Jesus into my heart, that actually opened up something in me that actually, pushed me toward Chinese culture. I started to learn Chinese on my own. I started to learn how to write my name. I started, asking the question, okay, so God, if you have me here for a purpose, you have me in this body for a purpose, and I want to understand why. I want to know why that is. So I think about the incarnation and the power of Jesus coming in a particular time, in a particular space, in a particular body.
Yes.
And so what does that mean for you, for me, that we're inhabiting this particular skin suit, that for me personally has held so much shame. And it's really only in the past maybe 3, 4, 5 years that I'm coming to actually embrace more and more and see how important it is, this idea of cultural dignity as just a central part of faith, and reclaiming, this is, I have a good story.
Yeah.
I have a good face.
Man, as you said that, something just came up in me, man. I have not processed this. Yeah, wow. Okay, two things. When you said the whole Jersey thing, okay, I was leading a Asian American event where I got the food, and it was good food. I don't remember which Asian American culture it was. It might have been, I think it might have been like Malaysian food actually. But anyways, it was on a paper plate and with chopsticks. And I was walking around campus with my backpack on, walking from the campus center to where I was next. I bump into a acquaintance friend, kind of white guy, Paul, not directly involved in my circles, but he had been, I think he lived down the hall from me or something like that. And I'm like doing this, I'm eating it, like, how Asians, we put our bowl up to the face, and I got used to that. I remember side note, I remember when I was a kid, I got made fun of because I'd done that once or twice at school. But I've got it up there. I'm holding, I have to, they don't have a table, right? I'm walking, so I have it up, I'm doing this, right? And then my friend sees me. Again, I maybe I should say friend acquaintance because I didn't feel that close to him. And then he's like, come on, Chen, you really got to be that Asian? Something like that. Man, that is I've had a lot of racist kind of things or whatever done to me, like microaggressions, but that one, man, I was like, what the?
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to react. And it's still, that one really hurts, I just moved on. I mean, and he didn't feel any type of way. He felt like he's on that. Southern guy. I mean, I'm not even gonna, maybe someday I'll call this guy up. I'm not in touch with him anymore, but just like, hey, let's process that. But that's one thing that came to my mind. And then the other thing is, I mean, this is connected back to in the campus industry times, with the Asian American stuff. You're saying shame around that stuff, or I don't want to dig into the culture. There was this Asian dance group. You remember this?
No.
888. They were called 888.
Oh, yeah, 8. Okay, yeah.
I have some friends involved in it, and 888, it has to do with Chinese culture, 8 sounds like it's ba, sounds like fa, and it has to do with like, Chinese, there's a lot of like wordplay as a part of its humor and it's part of its culture. And that fa is like sort of prosperity or flourishing. And so, or luck, and so that's that 888. It's a good luck, good enough, and that was the name of that dance group too. But and they called it 888, and they would do dances that was kind of a fusion of Asian inspired kind of things, but also like they would bring in hip hop, those kind of things. But I don't know, man. For something about it, like that, when some friends were in it, there was something in me that was slightly felt a little bit awkward about that. That like it wasn't as cool. And we all know within the broader cultural conversation, it's not as cool to say, if you've ever seen some forms of Asian artwork, like, I don't know, Chinese opera. I don't know if you've heard that. Go ahead and Google that. But I remember, my grandpa played this instrument called the erhu, It's just like a 2-string violin, but it's held upright like this.
Yeah, yeah.
To the Chinese opera where there people are singing like high-pitched voice. Am I allowed? Is this weird? I mean, I'll do it but it's just, it's kind of the interesting affects for how they would do it. And we would make fun of it like that when I was a kid, right?
Yes.
And
yes, my dad is still into it, and he still sends me videos.
Well, you know what? I'm interested in it now, right? Now I want to love that stuff, and like, and so the Asian art forms too, because it's like we know it's so deep in this. We know it's exoticized, and we know it's so other from U.S. Western, right? It's so other from Western that it can only be compared to violin playing or something like that, or say the Asian dance forms. It just feels like not cool compared to hip hop or something, right?
Right.
And we just feel, I think there's something else that's like, it's so much to unravel ourselves and to learn and to become proud of.
Yep.
That I'd rather just become Americanized. And I think that, I'm not trying to shame people that are like, I'm not deeply interested in every aspect of my East Asian history and culture and heritage, but there's something that says about more broadly about we are subconsciously deeply aware of how we're exoticized in our culture, or in what we look like, in our features, in all of that, in all of what materially, bodily, sort of culturally comes out of our broader tradition. That and it's so hard to know how to respond to any of those things when the ching chong ling long kind of things, or the eating our food. That it smells, because it has pungent. People say, oh man, your food smells. But not realizing from within our experience, I don't know what your relationship to Asian food is, but from within our experience, they're like, dude, you don't know that we have like the best tasting food in the world. You may think it smells, maybe because your sense of your nose, your whatever olfactory has not adjusted to or learned our food, but it is amazing. And of course, now broader American culture is discovering our food, turning them into these hipster spots, right?
Yeah.
Where you can find banh mi buns at like hipster bars, and it's $15, like pho, anything, right? Korean food is becoming mainstream and interest, hipster. But yeah, it's just like that's the hard thing, right? I mean, even to say that, we know hipsterization is kind of making something white or making something cool among the white elites or those who have money. And suddenly now you find our culture fascinating. But you actually maybe don't even find our culture. You just want to commodify it to the point where it suits you.
Yeah.
As another like ethnic food that what do I want to eat this weekend? Let me throw that ethnic food in there, and there's a sense in which deeply understanding the beauty of our this isn't just, I mean, I think we're of an awareness that, look, this is a huge portion of the world is Asian,
Yep.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg of our culture. And so it intersects not just with the fact that it's broader white culture, but the fact that we're American, and maybe the whole idea of, I was just discussing with a friend, with what is America about assimilation? Is America about just kind of a melting pot, or finding, like I've been using the language, finding your place at the table of beloved community together, as distinctly as yourself, not having to change yourself. I don't know. I'm all over the place, but
no, I love that. I love that. I kind of resonate just in terms of I'm more open now than ever to study Chinese opera. I hated hearing it. My dad, would play tapes on the weekends, like all Saturday, and it just sort of like so grating, and felt so embarrassed and shamed. But I'm kind of with you. I'm just like, I feel like this is actually something that I'm trying to see as really important to understand. It felt so other, even in my own home, but I hear you on that, that comment that the acquaintance made, the sort of the passing comment. I hear a lot of contempt there, and I think what comes up for me in that is, like, I think for so long Asian Americans have just become sort of containers for contempt for people's trash, and I think there's something maybe that we have to understand, maybe even a little bit more deeply, in the structure of Confucianism or filial piety, that shame is used, contempt is used, I think, to keep people in line, to keep harmony. And so I think there's something of a war probably within us to actually wrestle with and through sort of the deeply embedded structures of filial piety. And I'm not going to make waves. I'm gonna do my duty. I'm gonna suck it up.
Yeah.
That on one hand, I think we've got to just acknowledge and almost bless and say, like, this is actually
beautiful.
Yeah,
it's beautiful, actually.
To name it as something that's actually helped, retain culture and identity, but on another hand, just been so almost impossible for individuals to carry that weight, alone. So what does a new structure or family collective, you're saying beloved community, what does that look like for us? I think we're still trying to figure it out.
Well, do you think that broader, like, by naming that and by showing what that looks like, and are the norms that we implicitly carry, right? And maybe want to actually take away the shame around that confusion, that filial piety as a beautiful thing. Maybe is that something that we have, something as a gift? You talk about, we have cultural treasures to offer the world, right? I was watching a friend who's actually Chinese, I think Mexican. He actually wrote this book, Brown Church. Say friend acquaintance. I'm getting to know him, and about Latino, Latin, Hispanic Latin American church.
Yeah.
But he's also from a half Chinese background, but he was talking about the cultural treasures that we bring in. In their end of Revelation, the New Jerusalem, basically, right. Yeah. The future of God's world, that all of the cultural treasures of every group is brought in. And what if one of our cultural treasures is that, to be mined and offered to others, to maybe they struggle with a sort of sense of America, right? I mean, I'm going to use broad strokes words, but is it our whole capitalistic, Western individualistic, kind of, we operate as just individuals, with our, we don't know how to have a deep community kind of thing. Is that our sense of, freedom, American individual,
Right.
Where there's something beautiful about learning from a tradition where it's like, there is this proper lines of how we relate to one another. The honor and shame, not necessarily just being a bad thing, right? That, man, could people learn from the beauty of that? in American culture, and rather than we have to, I watch us wrestling with the honor shame component and then fitting into the American stuff that doesn't get that stuff, right? And what if it's more like, I even hesitate to say this, taking up more space by saying, this is Americans, can you learn to adjust to this way of relating?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how shameful is what you're saying? Shame on that, like you said, that racist comment. We operate from a guilt innocence framework here in the United States, right? That's racist, what you just said. That's the reaction. You say this to me, oh, come on, Jeremy. And then I say, that's racist, right? But I think maybe we're Asian. I guess still processing, but would it be like, wow, how shameful for your family for you to say something like that, right? Wow. Like that's such a difference. I don't know. I mean, because there's a beauty about this shame, honor shame context of attentiveness to the other, and attentiveness, how do you relate to the whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus just, oh, you are guilty, you are a racist.
Mm-hmm.
And then the conversation becomes, no, I'm not a racist. It's just a purely individual thing. But I don't know. I mean, I've never explored that thought before. Could that be? But anyways, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Brown Church. What would a book on Yellow Church? What do you think that would be? What could that be like?
It needs to be written. I don't know. Right? We have to imagine our way towards it, right?
Because again, aren't most Asian American churches just singing hill songs?
See, I can't even imagine. Man, we talked about music. Can you imagine? Okay. Actually, at this moment, can I show? There's a song that my parents taught me, and we would sing them to. It's Chinese. I'm gonna see if I can pull it out. And it was a Christian praise song. It's beautiful, and it was. We would sing it to like the nursing homes during like the holidays, right?
Yeah.
The white, people, mostly white, older people there. And I kind of know that they were exoticizing us in the process, because you kind of can't do otherwise, because it's. But I mean, it goes to this. This is kind of awkward for me, but ye di di hua, 穿着美丽的衣裳，天空的鸟儿从来不问什么梦，慈爱的天父，天天都看住，他跟爱身上人，为他们预备永生的路。So I don't know if you process what that was saying, but it was basically the words that was Matthew, was it 5 or the birds of the air, no, not the birds of the air, the flowers of the field, look how beautiful they are. God clothes them, and God loves you so much more than that, but the affect of that song, you hear it, you immediately know this is not American at all.
Yeah.
This is not Hillsong, this is not whatever African, black spiritual, there is some Asian-ness to it that I honestly felt awkward probably singing that up there when I was young. I am coming to find there is something mystically beautiful about this.
Great beauty, yeah.
I'm ashamed of having been ashamed of my cultural heritage when I was younger. And I know that, well, let's add this layer, that probably shame because they knew their kids, our parents knew where their kids wanted to culturally fit in. So them trying to share with us, and then us sort of rejecting it, and knowing it's the teenager thing too. But that made it difficult for them too, to fit into the whole conversation, because it's just a bigger gap. And it's almost like we're coming back to the point where we want to receive from them and help them process and culture, and was it enculturate, but like learn to relate to the broader American conversation too, which is many levels and many layers all at the same time, and it's so much. But we have to do that work of loving that culture that we had rejected as teenagers.
I think that's the beauty. I think that's the pattern of the cruciformity, maybe for us as Asians, of redeeming ethnicity, is yeah, going through that death and resurrection. It's beautiful.
Yeah. What do you mean by Chris? What do you mean by that?
So just that pattern of experiencing loss, shame, betrayal, contempt, and examining the wounds, and saying, in Jesus' resurrected body, those wounds do not go away. In Jesus' resurrected body, those wounds are there. So what are the wounds for us as Asian Americans? That as we bring our gifts, we bring them with our wounded hands, and they hold a particular resonance, particular kind of set of experiences that I think make the beloved community.
Yeah. Mike, the fact that I look at you as having had extended stays in these different, Asian predominant space, with the other campus ministry. Wasn't that predominantly white? I mean, it wasn't completely, it was more diverse, but it was probably predominantly white now, culturally, and then now predominantly Black. And I don't even know what the question is here, but well, one question is how is it going as the Asian among Black, because you don't often see Asian leadership in other cultural spaces, and how is that working with the different the phases of that, and will you?
Oh, it's been extremely healing and powerful, I'd say. Seeing being led by Black folks. Jimmy McGee is the president of Impact, and I just treasure every conversation, every every time we can get together, and every time I get together with the staff, I do feel like a kinship, but also I feel like how different it is as well. I feel both, and it's really good. Actually to feel both. So
Yeah, there's something in this where it's like learning from, I think we have to say we have to learn from the Black struggle and the brown struggle, and recognize our distance. It's not like just kind of try to follow them and like imitate it, and like
I'm not trying to be Black, and they're not trying to make me Black,
right? And just mimic their language, mimic all of it. Okay, Memo K is our guy too, that kind of thing. But like, we're proximate. I mean, it's like you're close, but then you're at a distance too. And then we have to figure out ourselves too, so that like holding all those together. But I'll say there's something that the other day when I was reading this stuff, because I actually, like you, the numbness, I actually I literally saved it for like 2 days later. I saw it, I was like, whatever. And then I'm like, I'm going to give it this time on Thursday or something like that. And then I just saved it. And then I was grieving. But I listened to this, some Black spiritual, like not even just, it was just like praise music, and then Spanish corridos, which I've been introduced to through our North Philadelphia church community. And dude, this was positive affect music, like happy. It was like joyful, like, but I was like, this was mysterious. I was like, this is helping me. This is healing for my soul in this moment. This is lament for me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is lament for my Asian American identification in my journey of Asian American identity. The cultural treasure of my brown brothers and sisters, my Black sisters is, and that's what reminded your comment of how it's been healing. You being in Black spaces, in a space of faith in Christ, that in Black spaces, for me, that moment I was like, this is healing for me. And I'm like, I wonder what the story was in composing this music.
Wow.
I wonder if there was suffering behind it as they're creating music of joy. And I was like, joy and sorrow seem like opposite things.
Mm-hmm.
But when they open you up to the life of heaven, when they are filled with, use our Christian language, right? When they're filled with the Holy Spirit, when they when they contain the heart of God,
Yeah.
when they humanize you, I mean, to be divine and human in the Christian story are not like equal and opposite, right? They come together in human beings that are made in the image of God. And Jesus, who is divine, human, perfectly. So they humanize us. They allow our weakness to come out, right? At the same time, they're making us more like God. I don't know. I mean, there's something there that's like mystically beautiful. As I was like doing that and like, you know, grieving that song of joy, I was like, this is heaven's sorrow pouring out through the joy in this song. I couldn't explain it, you know. Is this contradiction that's beautiful, you know?
Yeah, I think there's something there of the you know, the resonance of and that connection to of culture, right? This is deeply, it's such a deep expression of personhood, of collective culture, that maybe felt like a resistance or a protest song,
Yeah.
against the forces of darkness, of evil, of sadness, cynicism, despair. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and we're learning that form from our brothers and sisters of protest as a means of lament and a means of being present, and not only suck it up and move on, which maybe we can say, instead of having so much shame surrounding it,
Yeah,
knowing that maybe we went too far, right? And we need to uncover,
yeah,
but not having so much shame around it and saying that is a acceptable and appropriate at times form too for being and staying present and relating to evils done against us as individuals and together, right? I think that becomes important, right? So we're learning protest from our, you know, in that those forms, and learning how we uniquely embody it as Asian Americans, and learning from those Asian Americans who have done that in the past, right? Because some of them, they're just the trailblazer that maybe sound like the shrill, loud voice that we don't know how to identify with yet. And now we're coming to realize, oh, that's what they were doing, you know? Yeah.
There's Chinese opera as protest. Man, I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
Write it up, brother. Write it up. Or let's use that language. Yeah.
Jeremy, such a good, wonderful conversation.
You got to run.
Signed up Jameson and Silas for Little League, and
yeah,
they got tryouts today. So,
brother, I wonder. Well, we're going to be continuing to have these bigger conversations with bigger groups of people because we want to help, especially facilitate Black and Asian conversation surrounding some of these things. But I wonder if you could. You're a pastor. I wonder if you could kind of either maybe just a word of benediction surrounding all of this. You know.
Okay, hold on. One of my friends shared this prayer with me, and it was written by someone I have not met, Irina Kim Eubanks. My friend and mentor Jen Murphy sent, prayed this in a space, and I can pray this now, in a prayer for AAPI sisters, as we face unceasing violence. I'll pray this out. Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee, from the liminal places, you're familiar with the pangs of judgment and declarations of where you are from, quote unquote. You are acquainted with the unceasing violence of an empire which demeans your status, a religious institution that labels you a threat, and a society that crucifies your flesh as a scapegoat. You also know what it means to have your belly lavishly fed, feet lovingly washed, body skillfully tended to, burial clothes thoughtfully prepared, existence generously supported by women, those whose bodies were deemed a temptation, unclean, even shameful, were at the center of your ministry, present by your side, and given honor in your sight. In receiving the presence and gifts of women, you declared that our bodies are worthy of protection, our stories are worthy of witness, our gifts are worthy of celebration, our dignity is worthy of recognition. So hold us now, as our bodies are shaken by violence, our stories are rendered invisible, our gifts are dragged through the mud, our dignity is desecrated by forces of white supremacy, nationalism, xenophobia, alongside heteropatriarchy, fetishization, and capitalism. Remind us of the place we have in your sight, within your family, by your side, and grant us a healing of our whole selves, a mending of our bloodied communities, and a witness to our pain in a world of unceasing violence. Come now, come quickly, for we aren't sure how much we can endure.
Wow.
Amen.
Amen. Wow. Wow. I got to get that from you later, brother.
I'll send it.
Yeah. This has been a gift, brother. I have a lot to learn from you, and I hope
Yeah,
the conversation can be a blessing to others too.
we got some road to walk ahead.
Yeah.
It's gonna be good.
Yeah. Enjoy the day with your kids. Catching.